Welcome everyone to the first online discussion hosted by the South Asia Network for Communication, Displacement and Migration, the SAN-CDM. The SAN-CDM was formed in 2021, late 2021, mid 2022, by the Calcutta Research Group in collaboration with the DW Akademie. This was formed following a series of discussions called the South Asia Consultations with refugees, migrants, journalists, experts, civil society actors, etc., who are interested in migration and refugee situations across South Asia. And one of the needs felt from the South Asia consultations was that there should be a network in which all stakeholders can communicate and talk to each other and get insights about the commonality and the differences of refugee and migrant situations and media representations in South Asia. So with that purpose in mind, the SAN-CDM has been constructed, and it is hosted by the Calcutta Research Group and is a part of the Calcutta Research Group's ongoing work with on migration and forced migration studies in collaboration with the Institute for Human Sciences, the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung South Asia, and of course the DW Akademie. We recently hosted the inaugural conference of the SAN-CDM in February in Kathmandu, Nepal, where many of you had joined us. We also hosted a media workshop with various institutions in July this year, end of July this year. And we have also been holding regular media trainings, and we are very happy to have some of the people who participated in the media training and the workshop joining us today. With this, I will hand the proceedings of this webinar over to our friend Bharat Bhushan, who's a senior journalist and editor, also with 360 Info and a member of Calcutta Research Group.
Thank you, Samta. So as Samta told you, I'm Bharat Bhushan. I'm a journalist and a member of the Calcutta Research Group. So welcome to this roundtable discussion organized by SAN-CDM on taking stock, the refugee and migrant situations in South Asia. This discussion has been organized, as you've already been told, in collaboration with CRG and the DW Akademie. This is part of a series of discussions on the refugee and migrant situation in South Asia that SAN-CDM has been organizing. In today's roundtable discussion, experts and network members from different South Asian countries will discuss the current political situation, political events, economic crisis, and climate disasters that have led to massive human displacement and movement of migrants and refugees in South Asia. Each panelist will focus on any one single instance of displacement and migration from their country of origin. They will reflect not only on the causes and effects of displacement, but also on the way traditional and non-traditional media have covered these events and suggest what needs to be done, as well as what needs to be avoided in reporting on conditions of migrants. We have 5 experts from around South Asia. They are Iqbal Khattak, journalist and media development expert and head of Freedom Network Pakistan; Shafqat Munir, political and security analyst from Bangladesh; Shambhu Katel, journalist from Annapurna Media Group, Nepal; Grishma Kothar, independent journalist from India; MC Rasmin, Center for Media and Information Literacy in Sri Lanka. I'll give you the detailed introduction later, as and when they're called to speak. I would request each panelist to speak for maximum of 5 to 7 minutes, as we would like to leave time for discussion and questions from participants. Shafqat Munir has told me he has to leave by 8 p.m. definitely. So the good news is we also have to end by 8 p.m. definitely. So Shafqat can go to his engagement if we keep to our time limit. So I would like to finish the initial presentations by 7:35, 7:40 at the outer limit, so that we have half an hour for discussions. So I would now like to invite Iqbal Khattak from Pakistan. Iqbal is a very old friend of mine. He has 30 years of experience of reporting on national and international issues for all kinds of outlets. He's a passionate media freedom activist and served as the Pakistan representative of the global media rights organization Reporters Without Borders since 1999. He was General Secretary of the Peshawar Press Club, which I had the pleasure of visiting in his company once. and currently heads Pakistan's first media watchdog, Freedom Network, as its executive director. Iqbal, the floor is yours. You have 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you, Bushan, and a warm good evening to all the participants of this online meeting to discuss the refugee status in South Asia. And I think I deserve to be given the floor first because Pakistan is the country which is hosting the most refugees in South Asia at this time and for the last 30 or 40 years. I would mainly talk about the new phenomena because previously the media was reporting the refugee stories, but now the media itself is a refugee, and that's because that's what I refer to as to the Afghan media. Afghan media is now a refugee not only in Pakistan, but in many parts around the globe. But still, I think Afghan journalists are stranded in Pakistan, and they facing extreme difficult situation. The top of the list is that the UNHCR is not allowed to get them registered as refugees. And until they are registered, they are not entitled to get any international assistance from the UN Relief Agency. And Pakistan is hesitant to allow the UNHCR to start the registration of the fresh arrivals, particularly after the collapse of the Ashraf Ghani government on August 15 in 2021. And that's because of its fears and apprehension that once these small number of Afghan journalists or some other activists or some former employees of the previous government in Kabul are given registration opportunity, so that will open the floodgates for more refugees into Pakistan from Afghanistan. Is Pakistan at the moment treating 1.3 million registered refugees? We do not know the exact number of unregistered refugees still in Pakistan, but they say, but media reports said that they are also in millions, if not in thousands. So that's, I think, is the issue with media at the moment itself is facing. On top of this, I think that the Pakistani media or the UNHCR, I would say, is not, I mean, encouraging stories about the refugees issues, about the refugees problem. And UNHCRs cannot move until the government of Pakistan moves vis-a-vis the refugee issues, vis-a-vis the refugee status, despite the fact that it is hosting still millions of refugees. And I think the media is also not moving because there are no directions from the government to highlight the issue. Or the UNHCR is underfunded in Pakistan. Almost 50% of its projects for the refugees cannot be run because of funding issue. Only 54% projects are funded by the international community. And the rest of projects it wants to run cannot be run because of the funding problem. And because of the terrorism issue in Pakistan at the moment, and particularly after the Afghan Taliban takeover, the Pakistani Taliban have re-emerged, and they have strong safe havens inside Afghanistan. That is what the UN Security Council recently, a UN report stated. And the Pakistan government relationship with the Taliban regime in Kabul are not something which one should have wished for. And I think this terrorism issue is really creating anti-refugees feeling in the Pakistani media, because the security apparatus, the intelligence agencies, or the police, or the military are pointing their accusing fingers at the Afghans, at the refugees also, some of them. And we see that there is a crackdown taking place. The proof of registration for 1.3 million Afghans has not been extended after its expiry on the 30th of June this year. So they are now without any formal extension of the proof of registration in Pakistan. And that also stopping UNHCR from helping these refugees until they have valid documents, both from the government of Pakistan as well as the UNHCR. So I think the terrorism issue is costing the refugees also. We see that the Afghan journalists particularly have serious issues of visas. Their visas are getting expired. They are applying for renewal. Their applications are not responded to. They are neither denied the extension nor given the extension in their visas. And they are somehow imprisoned in their small homes or flats or one room or two rooms homes. As they get out of their places, the police ask for a passport, and their visas, as they find the visa expired, so they are immediately taken to the police station. And we've seen a number of journalists taken into custody. Then the Freedom Network and other partners rescued them and got their release from the police. But they are also not able to work because they don't have the work permit available with them because of the non-registration of issues. And on the other hand, the world attention is also moved away from Afghanistan to Ukraine. So more focus on Ukraine than on Afghanistan at the moment. And so I think that's also a contributing factor that Freedom Network and through other partners, we struggle to get some funding for these Afghan journalists. And it took 2 years to get now some funding available with us to assist these Afghan journalists, to integrate them into the Pakistani media, to create a kind of solidarity network in partnership with the Pakistani journalist community. So the fears on the back of their minds move away, and they begin to restart a new life, because some of them may not be able to get a visa for any third country, so they may live in Pakistan for longer than expected, what they expect to stay in Pakistan, despite the fact that staying in Pakistan for these journalists is also not without risk, because they are close to Afghanistan, and Taliban can target them even in Pakistan if they write something against them or if they highlight the current state of affairs in their countries. So I hope I may not have crossed the time bar. So if I have a few minutes more or a few seconds more, so I can still talk.
I think you should wind up because Shafkat says he has to leave by 7:45. So we'd like
so I think last I would say that we need to highlight the issue of refugees in Pakistan, particularly the Afghan journalists. It's a serious issue. It's a life and death for them, and they need to have some kind of fears-free environment available for them in Pakistan. Thank you very much, Bhushan.
Thank you, Iqbal. We didn't know this. Thank you for highlighting the fact that media itself, at least Afghan media, has become a refugee in the present situation. You highlighted how UNHCR is not registering new Afghan refugees, especially journalists, officials from previous governments, because they think this will open the floodgates of other refugees. You've talked of funding issues. You've talked of Pakistan itself being reluctant to register refugees, how registration has run out, and how these refugees, including journalists, are facing issues of expired visas being not renewed, no new visas being given, no work permit because of lack of registration, and how world attention has moved from Afghanistan to Ukraine, and that's also having an effect on the situation. So thank you very much. You were very succinct, very analytical, and in a short time, very detailed as well. So thank you. Now I invite Mr. Shafkat Munir from Bangladesh. Shafkat Munir is a well-known face in South Asia. He's a research fellow at the Bangladesh Institute of Peace and Security Studies, BIPS, and the head of the Bangladesh Center for Terrorism Research. He was earlier a fellow at the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, Honolulu, Hawaii. He's also a non-resident fellow of the Institute of South Asian Studies, ISAS, at National University of Singapore. He has done a lot of work on Rohingya refugees. If Pakistan is hosting 1.3 million Afghan refugees, the total population of Rohingyas in Bangladesh is more than their population in Burma, about 1.2 million. So the floor is all yours, Shafqat, 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And I want to particularly thank the Calcutta Research Group for inviting me to speak this evening. Since the time is short, I'll be very brief because we want to leave more time for discussion. As Mr. Bharat Bhushan said at the beginning, that Bangladesh is hosting more than 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh who have fled genocidal violence carried out by the Myanmar military in the Rakhine province, where it was their previous habitat. And according to UNHCR, the Rohingya refugees currently constitute 1/3 of the total population in the Cox's Bazar region, which is the bordering region where they're currently being housed. Since time is short, I don't want to dwell too much on the historical background and some of the challenges that are being faced by Bangladesh. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the humanitarian challenges which we were facing. First of all, there is a huge problem right now because the fund that is being used to provide food to the Rohingya refugees, that is dwindling. The World Food Programme has cited that $125 million is in shortfall in international donor funding. And that is the key reason why they have recently cut food ration support for the Rohingya refugees from $12 to $10 per person per month. Similarly, other humanitarian organizations are also facing problems in terms of overcrowding, inadequate sanitation, and not being able to provide access to basic services to the Rohingya refugees, which includes healthcare. And one of the key challenges is the providing education to the children, because there has been a long tussle between the government of Bangladesh and the international community on providing education. But I want to zero in a bit on what is the key subject of today's webinar and talk about the role played by the media and what the media has done, both electronic, print, and social media, but what are some of the challenges? Firstly, the press in Bangladesh has undergone a significant transformation in its portrayal of the Rohingya, initially presenting them as innocent victims, but later increasingly as threat, burden, and often echoing the government stance that there is security risk and so on. In August 2017, when the Rohingya refugees first arrived in Bangladesh, the media was very adept in highlighting that they're persecuted people due to their ethnicity and in religion and in dire need of humanitarian assistance. And Bangladesh was also lauded for the open border policy, the humanity, the generosity that Bangladesh showed, and the Prime Minister of Bangladesh was hailed as the mother of humanity. But the narrative quickly shifted, and within months, the media focused on the economic strain the refugees were placing on the host country. And as politicians and people in government started labeling Rohingyas as a security risk, which resulted in harsh policies such as internet restrictions, SIM card confiscations, more barbed wire fencing, we saw the media also increasingly talking about that. We've also, at our institute, looked at how local media portray the Rohingya refugees, and we've seen that in Ukia and Teknaf, they've played a significant role in fueling anti-Rohingya sentiments, sometimes presenting a one-dimensional image of Rohingyas as a threat and a burden. In the social media, which we also scan quite regularly, we see that there has been quite a lot of opprobrium aimed at the Rohingya populace, again, calling them a security risk and burden. And as the international media focus shifted from the Rohingya crisis, as other crises emerged, for example, the invasion of Ukraine and so on, local media interest also dwindled. For example, if I today look at Bangladesh's main newspapers in Dhaka, I rarely see any regular coverage of what is happening in the camps unless there has been an incident or unless there has been some kind of a security issue. So to sum it up, the reportage, which had initially started talking about the humanitarian aspect of the crisis, looking at the genocide which these people were trying to flee. But increasingly, as time went on, and now they have been here for quite a few years, the media reporting also echoes some of the sentiments shared by the authorities, but also by the host community, that how long are we going to shelter them? But yes, what is also very interesting that Myanmar was an absolutely unknown subject for the Bangladesh media. Momentous events would happen in Myanmar and the Bangladesh media would not really report on it at all. But because of the Rohingya crisis, we see that the media has been reporting a lot more on domestic political and security events in Myanmar. So that has been one change. And just finally, I want to say that in the social media in particular, we see a lot of negative portrayal of the Rohingya refugees. And sometimes there is also a huge challenge of disinformation about what is happening in the camps, which causes a lot of confusion, which causes a lot of furor, which causes a lot of misgivings about the populace. So to sum up, I would say that there needs to be more balanced reporting. There needs to be a greater understanding of the plight of the refugees. And we should not at any point, and I'm a security analyst, but I'll be the first one to point this out, we should not over-securitize any refugee crisis, but that is a tendency we see across South Asia. Bharat sir, I think I'm doing well in terms of time.
Yep.
Okay.
So thank you very much. Thank you. You done?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm always amazed, whenever I've talked to you in the past, how quickly and how succinctly you summarize things. You've given us a super bird's eye view of what's happening and how I'll leave the humanitarian challenges aside, which all of us are aware, but how the role of media changed was, I'm not sure whether everybody is aware, and I'm glad you emphasize how the narrative about Rohingyas from being innocent victims to security risks has actually pervaded the media. And that is the narrative of the Bangladesh government as well, to some extent. And that there are economic strain on Bangladesh, etc. Local media fueling anti-Rohingya sentiments, that happens. But how is it different from national media? I don't know, because I thought the national media was also focusing on that, but we'll take that up in the questions and answers. As international attention has shifted, you said no regular coverage is there, but the positive development is that Bangladesh is covering more about developments in its neighbor, Myanmar. And one couldn't agree more with you on balanced reporting, plight of refugees, and the need not to over-securitize the Rohingya issue. So thank you very much, and I hope people will have lots of questions for you. Now I invite Mr. Shambhu Katel from Nepal. Shambhu Katel is a highly experienced journalist from Kathmandu. He's currently working as the Chief of News at Annapurna Post Digital. Among other issues, he has reported on security affairs, migrants, and refugees. Mr. Katel, the floor is yours. About 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Sir, good evening, and thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for granting me this opportunity, Calcutta Research Group. And you see, talking about the refugee issues, Nepal has not acceded to the 1951 Refugee Convention or its 1967 protocol, and Nepal has no any domestic asylum legislation, no any rules, no any laws for the refugee. And the government has adopted the different approaches towards the various refugee population. And mainly Nepal government recognized the two groups as a refugee. The one is the Tibetan and second one is the Bhutanese. At the first time in 1959, the Tibetan people crossed the border from the Tibet side and they seek the asylum. And the Nepal government provide them some kind of assistance with the help of some UN agency, UNHCR. And in 1990, the Bhutanese people also came to Kathmandu, but both these issues with the political issues. So I don't enter into some political issues, but the more than 100,000 Bhutanese have been already resettled in the various countries, including the United States. And now the 7,000 Bhutanese are residing in the Nepal, and some of they are expecting some resettlement in other country, and some of they wants to back their own country in Bhutan. But this kind of this kind of disputes, and the government and the UNHCR has not decided anything about the Bhutanese. And talking about the Tibetan, and the Tibetan has started to come Nepal since 1959. And those the Tibetan, and they have a refugee card. Nepal government has provided the refugee card to Bhutanese and the Tibetan people. And they have no any kind of fear to go anywhere, and they will take some benefit from the UNHCR, and they can get a work permit, and they are easy to move from one place to another place. And some of they are already been in some other country also for the job and for the study. But those the Tibetan who born 1995 and who enter into the Nepal after 1995, they are still struggling for the refugee card. And the Nepal government has divided this same refugee in the two sides. Some people, they have a refugee card and they are taking the benefit and other kind of beneficiaries from the UN agency and Nepal government, and some of they don't have a refugee card. And these two groups, Bhutanese and the Tibetan, are not a big issues as a refugee in Nepal, but now the issue is the urban refugee who enter into the Nepal, and they don't have any kind of particular documents. They throw all kind of legal documents, and after that they will go to the UNHCR for the registration to seek the asylum. And in my data, I will show you the data. And okay, and there are more than 800 urban refugees are living in Nepal. And refugees from Iran, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Somalia, and Bangladesh. Among them, the high number is from the Rohingya people from the Myanmar. And the interesting thing is, according to the recent data, this time you see the people from the Philippines, people from the Ukraine, people from the Russia, they are also seeking the asylum now this time, and they already registered the application to the UNHCR, but UNHCR has not decided yet, and it is under the investigation what they said. And the main issue is the main problem the Rohingya people are facing here. You see, around 500-600 Rohingya people are here, but they have no any kind of shelter to stay. And UNHCR, they have provided some sort of identity card, like a refugee card, but they only get the refugee card, but they don't get any kind of facility the UN agency has given them. And UNHCR has cut down all kind of facilities, and only children will get some education and health service and education. But the young people, they don't have a refugee card. They don't have a refugee card provided by the Nepal government, and they cannot work. They don't have a work permit. They are facing a big problem. And the people from the Somalia, Afghan, and Pakistan also in the same problem, like the Rohingya people they are facing. And last week, I have seen some people from the Somalia. They went in front of the UNHCR for the agitation, but they're expecting from the food, shelters, and etc. If the UNHCR has provided them a refugee card, I am afraid why the UNHCR is not fulfilling the parental role to them. They are facing the problem. And sometimes I have also visited the UNHCR and I complain them about their rights, but they answer me a very simple answer. They cut down the budget for Nepal, and most of the Rohingya people are living in the Bangladesh, and all budgets are terminated into Bangladesh. So this kind of, and due to the lack of the some facility by the refugee. You see, the urban refugee, the illegal migrant, they are facing a big problem, sir. So thank you.
Thank you, Shambhu. I for one, and I claim that I follow Nepal very closely. I didn't know there were refugees from Somalia and Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
there. I know that Rohingyas are moving there.
Mm-hmm.
And that there are two categories of Tibetan refugees: those who came in 1959 and those who came after 1990.
Yeah.
I think there is some Chinese pressure as well for repatriation of some new Tibetan refugees.
Yes, sir.
I hope you'll talk about that.
It's some political matter. That's why.
Right. So no, but we can discuss it later on. That why is it that you can host so many refugees and not one more or two more or 500 more, and suddenly you're under Chinese pressure.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, and I hope people will have a lot of questions for you, and you'll also hopefully explain how Nepal, without signing the refugee convention, is actually issuing refugee cards. So what are they? National refugee cards, and what does it entail? What kind of rights does it give to the refugees? But we'll leave it for you to answer this in the question and answer session.
Okay.
Now, I invite Ms. Grishma Kothar. She is an amazing journalist. She is an independent journalist and an advocate from Tamil Nadu. She has authored an 18-part series on the rise of Hindu nationalism in southern coastal Karnataka. Most recently, she has been based in Manipur, moving across ethnic divides, and has been doing amazing reporting in the Caravan, Nikki Asia, and Al Jazeera, among other publications, on the ethnic cleansing and ethnic violence that has taken place in Manipur. She's also produced a number of YouTube videos about Manipur. Grishma, the floor is yours. 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, sir. So I can begin with, I think most people who are listening are informed about what's been happening in Manipur, that this violence which started in May, I would put it as violence that was steered by the Manipur state government. I wouldn't just call it a Meitei cookie clash like it's being called. I would say that this is ethnic violence that has been actively supported and steered by the Manipur state government. So I would position the ethnic violence like that, because there has been a lead up to the violence that happened in Manipur. There has been kind of targeting of the Kuki-Zo community in different ways, be it in terms of targeting their land systems, be it in terms of targeting their identity itself, be it also in targeting how they articulate their own issues or how they go against the state government, and kind of questioning the state government in some of its methods, in kind of trying to position the Kuki-Zo people as being anti-forest, or as being pro, or as calling the entire community as being pro-drugs, so to say, and constantly labeling them as illegal immigrants. That is a label that has been pushed by the state government and the Meitei community, which, I mean, it would be wrong to say the entire community, but since the state itself, the Manipur state itself, is predominantly Meitei, from its CM to most of the legislators, that is 40 legislators, it has kind of rubbed off on the community. So even though there is a war happening in adjoining Myanmar, with which Manipur shares a border, and people are fleeing from certain villages in Myanmar, which are burned down because of the war there, the lack of a clear policy from the Indian central government, the BJP government, has facilitated this kind of naming, which doesn't happen in Mizoram. Mizoram has created facilities and support systems for these displaced people fleeing from Burma, right? The reason why I call them displaced, I mean, we can refer to them as refugee, of course, but many of these people want to go back when they can. At least the people that I have met with in the border of Manipur and Myanmar, that is in Moreh, many of them have in fact gone back as and when they can. So it's like a very moving refugee population, displaced population. The reason why they want to move back to Myanmar is also because the economic systems there is better. Like price inflation is not as bad as it is in India. Things are more affordable. These are like the basics of the conflict as far as the displaced people from Burma are concerned. Now coming back to the ethnic violence in Manipur, the ethnic violence which started in May has led to the displacement of close to 70,000 people. 50 to 60,000 are within Manipur, and the rest have fled to other parts of the northeast. Some have also gone to Delhi, some have gone to Bangalore. So we can roughly say an approximate figure would be anywhere between 70,000 and 80,000. The displaced within Manipur are the Meitei displaced who moved from the hills to the valley, Imphal Valley, and the Kuki-Zo people who moved from Imphal to the hill districts. Now, within the displaced, of course, the displaced people are all affected, but the Meitei displaced who are in the valley are being provided minimal, not so much, minimal support by the state government, considering the state government is also Meitei. Predominantly, the functional government now is Meitei, and the displaced who are in the valley are Meitei. So they're getting some, as far as basics are concerned, they're getting something like 80 rupees a day in the relief camps. So that whatever it is, food, etc. This also they have said is very, very less. It doesn't like cover all their necessities. But when you look at the displaced in the hills, the only support that they have received up until now from the state government is 500 rupees. From the time that the conflict has started till now, they have got one settlement or whatever they want to call it of 500 rupees. They apparently are being given 1,000 rupees. They've received one sanction of 500 rupees each. I'm just bringing out the numbers so that how absurd it is can in fact be it can be out there, because when it comes to the displaced people in the hills, it is completely only the Kuki-Zo people, the CSOs, people from outside who are sending in supplies, who are supporting these displaced people. There's hardly anything that has come from the state government. Through the DCs, there are some bags of rice and dal that is given every week is what they say, but that is also not regular. Medical supplies are in shortage. Life-saving drugs like drugs connected with TB and HIV have to be airdropped by security forces because the roads are completely blocked from the valley towards the hills. So there is a discrepancy of how displaced people are treated, and that is itself the part of the problem, right? The whole problem is that now the state of Manipur is split in the center. There is no part of the hill that is being governed, so to say. The DCs are there, the SPs are there, but there is no support that is being received by the people in the hills. In fact, a part of the periphery area that I visited yesterday, there are 21 villages at the border of Churachandpur, which is the hill district, which haven't had electricity for 2 months, for more than a month, for close to 7 to 8 weeks now. So, and these things are not even, and that's the last part of what I want to say. And the fact that this hasn't been reported in any of the regional local media is part of the problem. The problem is that this violence, one of the reasons of this violence has been the way in which the regional media has been covering the issue from the time the violence started, but also before, has been kind of fanning the flames when it comes to referring to cookies as illegal immigrants or terrorists or drug peddlers or whatever, the kind of names that come up in the newspapers here. And also, while the violence is on, the narratives that were shared on the newspapers, on TV channels, on YouTube channels, the references to the people, the complete blockade of information. How is it that FIRs are registered about rapes as early as the 15th, 18th of May, and they were never covered by the local media? How is it that only a video which eventually emerged led to people speaking about the kind of violence that went on here? These are questions that we have to answer. I mean, we know the answers for it, but these are questions that need to be raised over and over again, because as the violence progresses, there was firing even yesterday, and there is firing even today. Yet, the reporting that comes through is cookie terrorists lead violence, cookie terrorists lead violence, and this continues to happen. So, yeah, that's about it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Grishma. I'm glad that you've given us your insights into this ongoing ethnic violence and ethnic cleansing. I learned a lot when I was in Manipur from you. And I'm glad you once again pointed out the absurdities of dealing with displaced people, how the mighty displaced are being looked after by the state, but they're also being looked after by the ruling party, the Bharatiya Janata Party. The relief camps for mighty displaced in the Imphal Valley are also being run by the ruling party. The ruling party is running not a single camp in the hill districts for the tribals. And you've also pointed out how the tribal displaced are hardly getting any state support. So they're not getting state support. That although they're all, 7 of their legislators are from the Bharatiya Janata Party, they're not getting any support from the party. I wish you'd also said how that the total division between the tribal areas and the non-tribal Hindu Meitei areas is such that vigilantes from the majority community do not allow even a grain of food, a tablet of medicine, a drop of petroleum to go to the hill districts. All the supplies are coming long distance from adjoining areas. In Churachandpur, for example, 400 kilometers from Mizoram. In Kangpokpi from Nagaland and other areas. But you at least pointed out the absurdities that exist there. And as for the role of the media, I wish you had been more hard-hitting in the sense that the media there in the Imphal Valley is Meitei-owned, Meitei-run by Meitei editors, and it's become a majority media which hunts in packs. I say all this because I went on a fact-finding mission from the Editors Guild of India. Our report should be out on Role of the Media there in 2 or 3 days' time. But I'm glad you pointed out how they name and stigmatize the tribals as illegal immigrants from Myanmar, which they are not. They may be, they've been able to identify less than 2,000 illegal migrants from Myanmar. But yet all tribals are, Kuki Zo tribals are referred to as illegal immigrants. So thank you very much, but we'll again take up some of these issues in the discussion. And now I go to our last panelist, Mr. M.C. Rasmin. He is currently working with the Foundation for Advanced Critical Thinking in South Asia, or FACTS. He is also the founder of Sri Lanka Development Journalists Forum. He has over a decade of experience on media development, teaching, research, and peace building in Sri Lanka and elsewhere. His focus now is on media literacy, media and gender, media and democracy, mobile journalism, and civic participation in the media. Mr. Rasmin, the floor is yours. Again, 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you so very much. So my specialization largely is media development, but to large extent in Sri Lankan context. I'm also, I would like to frame my 5 to 7 minutes within the area of media polarization in Sri Lanka. And also, I would also want to look at the refugee migrant sort of landscape, and then the response of reporting status of Sri Lankan media on this larger issue. So without taking much time to explain how polarized Sri Lankan media, I thought I would cite a simple example. In one of my previous year's study, we monitored Sri Lankan media, particularly how it responds to missing families and how it is reported in Sinhala media, and also equally how it is reported in Tamil media. And then finding is 243 articles were found on this issue in Tamil, whereas only 1 paragraph article was there in Sinhala. So you can imagine how polarized Sri Lankan media, given our past ethnic conflict and then the other sentiments, language, culture, religion, politics, ethnicity, all together, the Sri Lankan war. Within this situation, I looked at certain data, where we have the hotspots. So one of the primary hotspots is Tamil Nadu and other states, particularly for 58,000 Sri Lankan refugees. We have a bulk of refugees there. And then how media sort of handles this issue. When it comes to international refugees in Sri Lanka, 2020 date, according to 2020 UNHCR data, I think it was less than 1,500, majority from Pakistan. Of course, later we've had numbers from Rohingya. And also, as you all know, now Sri Lanka is going through a typical economic and political transition and a crisis situation. With this, how people choose irregular means to leave country. And I can also give you sort of very few statistics. The last year, official statistics, like 100,000 people, middle class people and full low wages, they left the country. And as of this year, January, I think we've had at least 75,000 people left the country for low wage salaries. And also, like one of the difficult source of travel for many Sri Lankans leaving the country is, unfortunately, is boat. So that is where they choose the irregular sort of way of leaving the country to mainly to European parts, Australia, Canada, and then of course for Indian states also. Like I also had some statistics from 2009 for European countries. There were incidents of 125 cases reported of irregular, or I'm not quite sure if I can say illegal travel, boat travel. I would say irregular. So at least 6,500 people sort of attempted. This is only reported number. And when it comes to those 58,000 Sri Lankans living in India to Sri Lanka, or Sri Lankan again leaving to India, there were like 48 incidents. Right. So now I also would want to sort of look at Sri Lankan media's response to this crisis. And I've been analyzing Sri Lankan media landscape in terms of understanding its sustainability in 2019, 2021. And I closely work with at least 20 to 25 editors and media development advocates in Sri Lanka. So that is my signal to say that I have only 2 minutes. So I'll make it within 2 minutes. So for me, like the major issue is, at least in Sri Lanka, understanding media's sustainability model. Media is going through a serious crisis of making its own survival. Therefore, it is in the custody of largely politicians or ruling government. And I can cite one of the statistics based on Reporters Without Borders and one of the think tank in Sri Lanka. At least 75% of the television listener share and 75% of the radio audience share and newspaper share were shared within 4 families. Either they are in politics or politics plus business. So the media environment landscape is operating in a non-free, non-independent environment where politics and business is extremely dominant. And also, media is purposely making loss. It means it survives for a different course, for its own survival. And I also observed in a certain situation where when Rohingya refugees were here in Sri Lanka and Pakistani refugees, lot of disinformations and ethnically driven sentiments, as if Muslims are trying to sort of dominate the Sri Lankan state, and this is international conspiracy and ISIS. And unfortunately, we've had this Easter Sunday attack in 2019. So my sort of observation is that if we are looking at the reporting status of this issue, definitely we need to understand the structure in which media is operating as a whole. And also, like, I want to really give statistics in my evaluation. I found out at least 15 to 20 international organizations are sort of hunting space, negotiating with editors for their own news in gender, health, child right, education. So where we sort of locate migrants and refugee issues in this. I mean, we only have Colombo and limited crowd of journalists, and I go for research and training purpose, and it is only the same journalist you go for representing any organization in Sri Lanka. It is only the same. So it's that crisis. Finally, my last point is, one of my students went on a trip to speak to people who returned from Australia, Papua New Guinea, Canada. The amount of story that they brought, I hardly even imagine is reported in international media too. For example, I'll take only 1 minute, only within 60 seconds. The amount of illegal brokers and agents being underneath of this system of operating in irregular migration. And one case study was, it said an agent worked with a family for more than 2 years to convince them for irregular migration, the boat route ways. And now they are sort of operating internationally, taking to Vienna, taking to different other countries. From there, they take, get different means of refugee status. So understanding this, my last point is bringing them in the form of a storytelling, not a reporting. I mean, people don't sympathize or empathize just data. They want stories in media. Whenever they bring sensitive storytellings, there had been a lot of social media reach, there had been a lot of discussion, even there had been a lot of policy level discussions in Parliament. So that is what is from my part. Of course, we can discuss certainly during the discussion time. I think my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I'm glad you touched on out-migration from Sri Lanka, because we hear all the horror stories of the boat people, especially going to Australia, and how many of them lose their lives in the high seas. The other very interesting point to my mind that you made was about understanding the media sustainability model, because that revenue model of the media based on ad revenue has failed in whole of South Asia. So media sustainability is a problem not only in Sri Lanka, but in other countries of South Asia as well. And people look for different revenue sources. And you're suggesting that in their search for staying, in their sort of effort to stay afloat, they become captives of politicians and businessmen who can underwrite their expenses, I suppose, to some extent, or give them advertisements. So understanding the media environment and why the media reports in a particular way, I think is very significant. So your conclusion was that we need to understand the structure within which the media is operating to see how they report on migrants and what influences their biases. You also said that there's a need for sensitive stories and humanitarian stories, human stories about migrants, and that they do have an impact in changing the views of public intellectuals and legislators. With that, we will now open ourselves to questions. Request Samata. There have been a number of questions in the chat. So would you like to list those questions? Maybe go with the comments first and then the questions.
Yes, I will try to also group them together depending on what kind of comments and questions they are. So the one set of comments and questions deal with India and the Manipur situation. Patricia Mukim asks and also opines, is it not high time for India to have a refugee policy? Else we end up demonizing the Kuki-Chin people who are fleeing the violence in Myanmar and taking shelter in Manipur Hills and Mizoram. Besides, even the Kuki, Chin, Zo tribes that are already Indian citizens are being called illegal immigrants. A similar opinion is further expressed by, I think, just a second, there's so many questions, I'm slightly confused. Also, Patricia Mukim further writes that the problem in Manipur today is that Kukis or people who are government employees or in Manipur University and other institutions based in the valley are unable to join back to their jobs. Students from the hills who are in Central Agricultural University and medical students in RIMs are also similarly affected. Our colleague from Assam, Anjuman Ara Begum, also attests to what Grishma said. So Anjuman writes that as per information of a friend in Churachandpur, there are 160 camps there with 1,053 inmates without separate rooms, temporary toilets, no bathrooms, poor sanitation, communicable diseases, people sleeping on the floor for more than 3 months. This is so tragic. Schools have opened in the valley, but not in hill areas, as lots of camps are the schools. We have reported this to the Supreme Court through our PIL, Women in Governance versus Union of India. So this is the set of comments that deal with Manipur. There's another set of comments which have been directed at Shafkat Munir. So Hashmat Vedjani says, thank you very much. Sorry, not Hashmat Vedjani. There's someone else who had thanked Shafkat Munir for the work that he has done. And Asima Sheikh has asked, can you please bring to light the repatriation issues going on in Cox's Bazar? Iqbal Khatak was thanked for his comments on the condition of Afghan journalists in Pakistan. There's a further comment by Shayon Kandar, who asks about the human rights questions related to climate change-induced displacement in the Indian context. For example, the Ghoramara Island has already lost 75% of its land due to sea level rise and river erosion. I'm assuming something similar would be happening in Bangladesh as well. There is a longish comment directed to everyone by Mohammad Shoaib Ansari, but specifically with respect to India, who asks that why has India been distinct from treating one refugee group differently to the other? It is evident in the way India grants full protection and assistance of all kinds to the refugees coming from Sri Lanka and Tibet, but does not do so to refugees from Myanmar, Palestine, and Somalia. And does this have anything to do with its non-signing of the UNHCR Refugee Convention? So what is, and this question is towards Grishma and Bharat, you yourself, is it an effect of the current regime? But we also know that this is not something that has only been brought to the fore by the current regime, but it has been there for as long as India has been there. Yeah. Shupratik's question is about what brought about the transformation of the media coverage of Rohingya refugees from innocent people seeking protection to people posing as a security risk to the country. This question is to Shafkat Munir. These are the questions, a lot actually.
Yeah, so can we start with Shafkat because he has to go. So let's start with Shafkat.
Thank you. All excellent questions. I will talk first a little bit about repatriation. I think there was a question about repatriation. What is happening currently is that the Bangladesh government is talking to the Myanmar side to have at least a sizable number of people repatriated by December. Now, one has to understand that the motivation here is that there are general elections coming at the end of December or early January in Bangladesh. And the government, the current Awami League-led government, wants to show that it has achieved some success in terms of repatriation. But the numbers vary. Sometimes it's 3,000, sometimes it's a bit more. Several exploratory missions have gone across to Rakhine. But the challenge is the refugees who are here are still not convinced that once they go back, they will be treated with dignity, they will not be persecuted, and they will be able to get back their land. So multiple talks are happening, some at the track 1 level, some at the track 1.5 level, but also at track 2 level. The militaries are also talking, but not much headway has been achieved. But what is important to note here is that some of the recent talks about repatriation are also backstopped by some Chinese mediation. So that's where it stands right now. Now, the question regarding why the media's portrayal changed. It changed because of very various reasons. But it changed because the government's narrative changed. It changed because there was a lot of host community tension with the Rohingya. And to go back to Bharat sir's question earlier about what is the difference between local media and national media portrayal. National media portrayal, despite the negative coverage, there is still a little bit of nuance. But when we analyze local Cox's Bazar or TechNav-based newspapers, there has been a bit more vitriol in their coverage when it comes to the Rohingya. But going back to the broader point, it is essentially, I would categorize it with two reasons. One is the government narrative, but also as fatigue set in, as there was no headway in terms of repatriation. The public mood also turned sour, particularly in that area, and the media started to reflect that. But there has been a tendency on the part of vernacular media, at least some newspapers, not the very large ones, to sometimes play up the security challenges a bit more. But yes, I would say that's one of the reasons why the media portrayal changed. But one of the other challenges is that the media doesn't talk about it enough also. There are a lot of humanitarian and other issues which are happening, but you will not, other than one or two big newspapers, the others you will not see a lot of coverage. And especially as Bangladesh's political situation becomes quite volatile in the run-up to the elections, there is a lot more focus on domestic politics, justifiably, and therefore less coverage on the what is happening in the camps and in Cox's Bazar. So I think those were the two questions directed with me. I'm happy to jump in again when needed. Thank you.
So I had a question for you on repatriation. Haven't a few Rohingya refugees been repatriated? I think not even in two-digit numbers, but some. I remember reading somewhere that some have been sent back.
Very, very small numbers have gone back.
Yeah.
Again, there was a mission which had gone to try to send more people, but of course they were not willing to go back. But there is the State Minister for Foreign Affairs has said that by December, at least 3,500 to 4,000 or even a larger number will actually go back. Let's see.
Yeah. And how would you compare the refugee camps in Teknaf with some of the refugees being taken to this island, Bhashanchar, which looks like more a penal colony for refugees rather than, because they can't move out, unless they go out into the sea. So how are the conditions there compared to?
See, Bhashanchar, sir, the infrastructure is quite modern. A lot of money has been sunk in to build the infrastructure. I hope I'm speaking very candidly here. I hope we're on Chatma's rules. But, and the government spent a lot of money in promoting Bhashanchar as well. So the diplomats were taken there. So initially they were very reluctant to endorse it, but they came around eventually. But yes, there are major concerns about environmental sustainability. There are major concerns about access to the outside world and so on. And it's so far away from everything. So that's been a bit of a problem. In terms of physical living condition, I would say Bhashanchar provides a better living condition because the infrastructure, over $1 billion were actually spent to construct that place. But there are, of course, other challenges there as well.
Okay, thank you. Maybe now Grishma can take the questions relating to the violence in Manipur and the displaced people there.
Everything that Patricia Mukim ma'am pointed out is true. I have reported on all those points about, the employees, Kukizo employees who are now displaced and outside of the valley, not being able to continue their work if their office is in the valley, and students not even being able to access their books, like the medical students from RIMS, Jenims, who are now displaced and are in the hills. Some of them have, there are other doctors in the hills who are trying to take classes for the first years. Now, these first years, their books are in the valley, in their hostels. When they tried taking that out through their Naga friends, those boxes were stopped. And some of these boxes, while they were being, transported by Pangals, again, another person raised a question about Pangals. While they were trying to be transported by Pangals, their autos were set on fire. With consignments of books. Now, so that is to show you the point that Bharat was highlighting, that nothing moves from the valley to the hills. Even books, medicine, whatever you want to try and transport, it just doesn't move. There was a shortage of TB medication and HIV related medication, which had to be airdropped by the security forces last month because it completely ran out in Sisipur, and you know what that means. As far as the Pangals are concerned, very true. Since
You explained that
Pangals are
the Pangals are
the
Muslim.
Meitei Muslims.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pangals
Meitei
are Muslim.
Muslims. Yeah, I was coming to that. The Pangals, who are also Meitei Muslims who are, for instance, there is a region called Kuakta between Churachandpur and Bishnupur, which is where Kuakta is. Kuakta is a Muslim settlement with close to 30,000 Pangals. Now, this region has been like a buffer zone because the Meiteis from the valley side, they keep entering this region, the Pangal Muslim region, to kind of fire at the hills. But what ends up happening in this process is they constantly target the Muslims. They keep telling the Muslims that y'all are informing cookies of what we do. Y'all are informants of the cookies. And through that, they have, some of them have moved away. Some of them are in relief camps themselves. Some of them have also been shot at. There was this individual who was kidnapped from Kuakta 2 weeks back, taken to Lilong, which is an area, a Muslim area in the valley. He was shot at in his leg, and again by armed Meiteis, by militia. No FIR has been registered about this. This guy is right now missing, meaning he was admitted in a hospital. Once he was discharged, he just disappeared, because Pangals generally, especially from Kuakta, especially because it's in a buffer zone, are very, very scared. The Pangals, even in the valley, even in Lilong or in other parts of the Imphal valley, are very scared. And the constant thing that they keep saying is that the Meiteis are trying to drag them into the war, trying to get them to take sides, but that's something that, they don't want to do. They can't do, because even the Meitei Muslims have been subjected to violence by the Meiteis in 1993, May 3rd, 1993, in fact, where many of them were killed in the valley itself when violence happened between the Meiteis and the Pangals. So, yes, Pangals are being targeted. Even there have been instances of Naga woman. A Naga lady was shot dead under the suspicion of being Kuki. And she was shot dead pretty brutally. And then there was a settlement that happened between a Naga CSO and a Meitei CSO. There was another incident where a Naga woman was targeted. But they are according to the Kukis and the other players, they are in a better negotiating space than the Pangals. So that is as far as the other communities are concerned. But as far as the Kukizo people are concerned, like I said, and like Bharat pointed out, and like Patricia ma'am also pointed out, there's a complete divide. There is absolutely no conversation. Forget about conversation. There is nothing. Even PDS rice, something as basic as PDS rice, is blocked off by the valley. There is a district called Tengnopal, which is actually facing a food shortage now. It's at the far end. It's where More is. It's facing acute food crisis because of the blockade in Taubal. It's also facing shortage of medical supplies. Churachandpur and Kangpopi are slightly better off. By better off, I just mean that supplies get to these places in like 15 hours or 18 hours. But for supplies to reach Tengnopal, at times it takes close to 6 days for the supplies to travel from Dimapur through Ukrul and to reach Tengnopal. So the hill districts are very, very affected when it comes to even basic supplies that even the non-displaced people, general people who live here face. Then you can imagine how difficult it will be for the people in the relief camps. I think I've answered all of them. Is there anything else that I have to, Samata? In the questions that she pointed out.
Yeah, you've addressed everything.
Yeah. For a friend in Nepal, I have a question. You talked about the refugees from Bhutan, Lotsampas, the Nepalese or Bhutanese origin who were chased out by the King's army in 1990. They came to India. India, instead of giving them shelter, pushed them to Nepal.
Yeah.
And now you're saying 1,000 of them have been resettled. But there's been so much corruption. The biggest scandal about refugees recently was that a former deputy prime minister's wife, a home minister, a deputy prime minister himself, a home minister, secretary, they were all involved in giving false papers to regular Nepalese citizens as Bhutanese refugees and promising, taking money from them and promising them that as migrants, they would be resettled in America. Now, what's happened to that? Has that been settled to everybody's satisfaction, or has that been pushed under the carpet?
So second layer investigation has just started. The police is investigating on the second round. In the first round, the former home minister went to the jail, as you mentioned before, and there's some high-profile politician and the incumbent secretary of the ministry, and there's some agent who used to collect the money from the different normal people. They all are in the custody now, actually in the jail, but the court has not decided. Maybe after 1 or 2 weeks, and the High Court will decide something, sir. Okay. But it is police has started the second round investigation, so but it is not in, sir.
Okay, Samita.
I think we have addressed most of the questions.
So there is a question which was also addressed to me, which is that from Mohammad Shoaib Ansari, that he said historically it appears that the approach of Government of India is different for different sets of refugees. I think he's absolutely correct. Tibetan refugees have been welcome in India, and now they're being those who want to become Indian citizens. That offer is there with them. They choose not to become, most of them choose not to become Indian citizens. They want to remain Tibetan, maintain their Tibetan identity in the hope that someday they'll go back, or maybe they want to go abroad. And the way we treat Rohingyas, the thing with Rohingyas is the government's position is that Rohingyas are not refugees in India. They are illegal immigrants. They may be refugees in Bangladesh because they cross Bangladesh and then they enter India. So refugees in Bangladesh, but illegal immigrants here. But these are not, I don't know of Palestinian and Somalian refugees in India. This is the first time I'm hearing. I don't know how sizable their population is. But India's attitude, even to, it's not because Rohingyas are Muslim and therefore they're being targeted. That is also true. But the Nepalese from Bhutan who are Hindus, they came in. They were not given refuge in India. They were pushed into, made a problem in Nepal. They were not Nepal's problem. We were the next country of refuge. So we treated them also differently. He further says that, how do you see the plight of refugees under the current far-right Hindutva regime of India? Well, there is a general problem of refugees in India, which remains because India is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention. India does not welcome all refugees, as I've just said. But what has happened is we've had the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, which actually gives preference to refugees on religious basis. So Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Parsis who are being persecuted in India's neighborhood can come in, and their citizenship request would be fast-tracked. But if you're a Muslim, let's say a Shia from Pakistan or an Ahmadiyya from Pakistan who's being persecuted, you're not welcome. If you're a Sikh in Afghanistan, you're welcome. So that is the impact Hindutva has had. Those that are broadly seen either within the Hindutva family or do not pose a major challenge to it, they are welcome. But Muslims are not. So yes, it is determined by the ideology of the current government in power.
There's a further question, but before that, along these lines, have Pakistani and Bangladeshi Hindu refugees had better or easier access to asylum in India, even prior to the right-wing government's ascent to power? This is one. But I would also like to ask a question to MC Rasmin, who has to leave right away in 5 minutes. So I wanted to know what is the reason of such disproportionate coverage of certain issues in Tamil and in Sinhala newspapers, because this is something we have just started to grapple with at CRG, and same with Kukizo coverage or other regional coverage, how vernacular shapes a problem in a certain way. We've just started to think about this, and so we would love to hear your comments, and then maybe we'll discuss Anushri's question.
Thank you. Thank you. I think one must need to understand the historic context to it is that media from both the camp, from Tamil-speaking camp, which is predominantly media based in Jaffna, and the southern media, which is predominantly, we call, I mean, despite some English media are liberal, but the other media largely fueling Sri Lanka's conflict. So there were historic divides, Tamil and non-Tamil. What happens is like Jaffna, the northern part is known as Tamil media island. Unlikely in other country where you have your own radios, on TVs, on newspapers, on satellite. And sometime during the war, there were desperate attempts where the state media and the local media channels were disallowed, not allowed to people from the north, because the idea is that they should not be informed about what is going on in the country. Instead, they were given a lot of South Indian, films and, all this cinema stuff from, and they made their heroes from Rajinikanth to Vijay to all these South Indian films. They were very happy. They were very romantic about their entertainments without thinking what is happening in the country. So there were a lot of politically organized sort of attempt to make sure that the people from the north are not informed or purposely or accidentally. So that is the root. Then what happens is the northern media hub, the landscape started growing as it's a unique, separate, its own identical language-wise, ethnic-wise, geography-wise, unique. And they started discussing about human rights issues that are very much closer to Tamil-speaking people, issues that are very much closer to people that were affected by the war, which is not sometime the favorite topics of the media in the South. So what happened is South is reported on development issues. North, the Tamil media mostly started looking at people's struggle, criticizing policy issues, looking at solution to ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka, looking at human rights issues, displacement, land, language rights, health, education rights, plus, we've had this Indian 13th Amendment in Sri Lanka and entire Tamil-speaking province, at least the North, wanted to see it as unique ethnic community in the North. So this divide influenced the media. So what happens is like single media sometimes think, oh, human rights issues, not all media, but largely. I mean, issue of internally displaced people, land issue, language, any discrimination, right-based issues faced by people in the North is sometimes not seen as a serious news in the South. So that I think evolved. Then politics sometimes started dominating the narrative. A lot of disinformation, ethnically charged, religiously charged, geographically charged, language-wise charged. You have all these reasons, factors to craft them as two different entities and two different landscapes. So that, I think, is what is partly sort of shaped this divide. Thank you.
I also have a question for you, Mr. Rasmin. One is, why does media polarization continue even after winning the war against LTT? You would think that after the decimation of LTT, Sinhalas would become slightly larger-hearted. Why has that happened? One. And two, why do you refer to the 13th Amendment as the Indian Amendment? I mean, after all, it's an amendment that was proposed to settle the ethnic conflict by devolution of powers. So amendment would be made by Sri Lankan Parliament, not by Indian Parliament. So it's not an Indian amendment. It may be an Indian suggestion, but anyway.
I am not quite sure if you are aware of the level of influence that Indian government is having at the moment through diplomatic channels to sort of, influence, if not urge or warn Sri Lankan government to government on this 13th Amendment. I thank you for raising this Very wonderful question. I think I have two answers for this. Your first question, we thought in 2019, sorry, not 2009, the final part of the confrontation, okay, now we have the liberations and the country won. But the narrative of media is that not the country won this terrorism, but Sinhalese won the war. It is the Sinhalese South government won the war, and the role played by the Tamil politician, Muslim politicians, Muslim leader, Muslim community, Tamil community as a whole were not certainly accommodated to think as a whole country that we have just came out of this 30 years of bloody war. With that, if you see very closely how Sri Lankan politics operates, the divide and rule politics and ethnically sort of motivated politics is always the 2019 general election, 2019 presidential election results were extremely evident that people vote not for who is the best candidate. People vote for their emotions. People vote to beat another ethnic community, ethnic minority. So, the higher level structure is inevitable sort of, direct way of influencing the media. So media continue to remain, of course, not as it was previously before 2009, but I think the divide is still there. When it comes to 13th Amendment, now we have a new devil, new ghost. Previously we've had this Muslim terrorism ghost, and earlier the Tamil ghost, and now this 13th Amendment. I mean, this is everywhere in Sri Lanka's media, and I would say as a way of converting people's attention from their policy and economic crisis. And of course, Sri Lankan government is entitled, and it is their right to decide to make sure that a community that has been suffering from the war for the last 35 years should have autonomous political autonomy to decide their own life within the framework of overall united Sri Lanka. And I think 13th Amendment is certainly offering provisions for that, is now seen as the way of dividing once again, the ghost creating the country. So that is the reason.
Okay. I think Nasreen wants to ask a question. Nasreen, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have a very small, perhaps a naive question. First to, I think, Rasmin, about what is the role of youth, especially in post-war Sri Lanka? Do you see any kind of role for them? But a larger question I want to place to the panelists is, why does the media feel compelled to speak in multiple voices for any event? I know there's an easy answer, but I was hoping that if you could deliberate and figure out why there seems to be not only multiple, but there's intense, I think, taking a cue from what Bharat was saying. It's just not about a country. It seems to be across South Asia. So be it on ethnicity, be it on citizenship. So I was just hoping you would be able to engage with both of these. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I would rather prefer the first question. Even though I like the second question, because that I think is the major question we all need to discuss throughout. And I think I remember I've raised this same question in one of our previous consultation also. I mean, without understanding media's multiple roles and changing notions and in their narratives, I mean, we are clueless. I mean, we cannot just count the number and say, this is how reported and this is what media is operating. The issue is much deeper than that. I really understand, Nazreen. It is only because of the time constraint. I'm not dealing with that, allowing others to, invite if there is any other questions. But coming back to your first question, I mean, just to make it very short, from my own experience, I was working with 300 young journalists from different linguistic, faith, ethnic, and geographic context. and I paired them. For example, if myself and then Samatha is from Jaffna, and if I'm from South, we have never meet together. We don't understand each other's language. We are from two different, and I paired them. And I gave them mobile storytelling training and mobile phone. Go report and come back and tell us. I mean, I'm not worried about your reporting, but come and tell us how this exercise has changed your perception to work with each other and to break your traditional narratives, mindset, and look at Sri Lanka as a whole, address the common human rights issues. You won't believe large number of, out of 300, large number of young people said, we are in our 25 to 30, between 30 to 25. This is the first time we were given an opportunity to understand the heartbeat of the person from a neighboring community. Otherwise, we were like thinking, oh, we are all, X and Y, but we never understand the person who lives in our next geography and belongs to a different culture and language. Now, having said that, there is some understanding as a result of continuous trainings on media literacy, disinformation, state-sponsored fabrications and propagandas. Now there is a positive skepticism among younger generation to sort of understand their own filter bubble, understand their own echo chambers, and to re-question everything that is, there in the media, to form companionship with people from different parties to address this issue. This trend I have never seen in the past. So this is a growing positive environment in Sri Lanka among younger generation, even in the recent past, whenever we've had riots and conflicts and this various conflict in different hotspots, these youth were very vocal. We need to be very vigilant in terms of understanding the agendas driving this conflict without getting into fight in social media. So my response to Nazreen is like, there is a positive sign among younger people, understanding each other's. Thank you.
Okay. So Samatha, should we round it up now, because we've got only 3 minutes left? And on the second question of Nasreen, I think we can have one whole panel discussion next time around.
Yeah, I think we are good to go. We just had 2 more questions that I will read out for everyone, but maybe we can discuss them later. One was from Ashima Sheikh, who wanted to say, adding to Bharat sir, I think that is about national interest too. By checking our larger interests, India treats different kinds of refugees differently. So Tibetans, India cozies up to counter China, and Afghans to upset Pakistan. But in the context of Rohingya, they have nothing to win or lose. Therefore, it chooses to remain disinterested. And Sujit, our colleague from Nepal Institute for Peace, says that the common people do not have faith in Nepalese media that there will be free and fair investigation on fake refugee scam, as there has been involvement of senior leaders, aides, and relatives of ruling party and opposition in this organized crime. Again, something extremely relevant to what we have been discussing today. So yeah, we can call it a day.
So yeah, but before we call it a day, I was just jotting some notes about do's and don'ts, because we have a lot of journalists amongst us, So what should you do while reporting on media? Because that's the purpose of these discussions. So as Rasmin said, tell the story with a certain amount of humaneness. Tell human stories. Empathize with the displaced. Focus on their suffering. And Grishma's case, for example, if you read her reports, they're absolutely superb, because her links with the displaced community are absolutely superb. So improve your links to the displaced community if you want to report on them in the long run. Raise the alarm on situations that could lead to displacement or migration, as in fact Grishma's reports have done. And I have to say this to my friend Shambhu, since he's chief of news, that look, you are an editor, chief of bureau. If you cannot have a migration beat correspondent, I would say, first of all, have somebody to report on migration displacement, because climate displacement is a big issue in Nepal. These are Nepalese being displaced because of climate disaster. So have a beat correspondent doing, reporting that. And if you can't have a migration beat correspondent, then at least sensitize your environment reporters on climate change and displacement. Send them to CRG workshops on climate change and displacement. And And your political reporters should be sensitized on conflicts and how conflicts also lead to displacement. And that's a major outcome of conflicts. Again, to Shambhu and other editors here, encourage ethnic and religious diversity in newsrooms. So if there's greater diversity in the newsrooms, if minority representatives are in the newsrooms, if there are a lot of cookies and Maithili dominated media in Imphal, then chances are that people will learn to empathize. The don'ts in my list are do not follow the agenda led by politicians, which is what the Manipur media has done, the Maithili media. Do not play malevolent anti-migrant overplay malevolent and anti-migrant statements of politicians. This is what Maithili media in Imphal did, calling Kuki Zo tribals narco-terrorists, calling all of them Kuki militants. Do not use loose language. In other words, do not use language laced with hyperbole, intolerance, and distortion, which is what we have seen in the case of Manipur. And do not use descriptors for refugees and displaced people as swarms, termites, as our Home Minister used, or that we are being invaded by refugees and migrants. They're not coming by choice. They're being forced. So understand that they, like you and I, they had a certain dignity which has been snatched away from them because of either a conflict or a natural disaster or some other reason. And if you're a reporter, ask your editors to send you to the spot. Do not rely on telephone calls, because if you go to the spot, your whole attitude changes. You become much more well-informed, and you're able to provide in-depth and sensitive reporting. Sensitive reporting cannot be done sitting just in newsrooms and operating on the phone. So, I mean, these are just off-the-cuff remarks on do's and don'ts on reporting on displaced people and migrants. With that, we end this panel discussion. You've all been absolutely amazing, and the comments were really insightful, and the panelists were very, very good. I know 2 of them have left us early, but they had other engagements. So thank you, and see you again at our next panel discussion. Goodbye and good night.